What happens when anger, desperation, and a sense of injustice collide inside one man's breaking point? What if that man decides that the only way to fight a system he believes is rigged against him is not through courts, not through negotiations, but through a weapon wired directly to another man's neck? That is the terrifying, strange, and strangely human world of Dead Man's Wire, directed by Gus Van Sant. This is not just a hostage thriller. It is a story about rage, media spectacle, economic desperation, and the thin, dangerous line between victim and villain. The film takes place in 1977 inside Indianapolis, a city caught between working-class struggle and corporate expansion. The story reflects a time when mortgage debt, banking pressure, and economic uncertainty shaped the lives of ordinary Americans. The atmosphere of the film is deliberately analog. Phones are wired, television news is still learning how to handle live crisis broadcasting, and public spectacle is beginning to merge with crime. Van Sant builds the world using gritty visual textures similar to the storytelling style of Sidney Lumet, especially films like Dog Day Afternoon. The story follows Bill Skarsgard as Tony Kiritsis. Tony is not portrayed as a classic criminal mastermind. He is nervous, jittery, emotionally unstable, but also strangely polite and surprisingly articulate. Tony is a struggling businessman who wanted to develop real estate land. He believed he was cheated by Meridian Mortgage Company, a financial institution connected to powerful corporate interests. Tony fell behind on mortgage payments. In his mind, the system was deliberately working against him. Whether he was correct or not is left ambiguous. The film intentionally explores that gray zone. Tony represents the small man fighting what he perceives as economic oppression. The crisis begins when Tony enters the mortgage office carrying a long cardboard box. Inside the box is a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun, and something far more terrifying. He rigs the shotgun to Richard Hall, played by Dacre Montgomery. Tony forces Hall to wrap a wire around his neck. The wire is connected to the shotgun trigger. The logic is simple and horrifying. If police shoot Tony, the wire tightens and the shotgun fires. Hall dies instantly. This device is called the Dead Man's Wire. It functions as both protection and psychological control. It prevents police from shooting Tony, and it prevents Hall from attempting escape. Unlike many criminals who hide from authorities, Tony does the opposite. He intentionally invites attention. He calls radio stations. He speaks with his favorite DJ, Fred Temple, played by Coleman Domingo. Fred Temple is based on real radio personality influence figures of that era. Temple becomes a strange emotional bridge between Tony and the outside world. The film uses this relationship to explore something very modern, early forms of parasocial celebrity connection. Tony feels understood by the voice on the radio. He believes Temple is the only media figure he can trust. Tony's demands are very specific. He wants debt forgiveness, $5 million compensation, and a public apology from the company owner. The company owner is M.L. Hall, played by Al Pacino. Hall is vacationing in Florida during the crisis. He refuses to negotiate. Pacino's character is emotionally cold, almost reptilian in his indifference. He represents corporate authority that refuses to acknowledge moral responsibility, even with his son's life at risk. The film spends a large portion of its runtime inside confined spaces. Richard Hall is not just physically trapped, he is psychologically trapped. Dacre Montgomery delivers a performance built almost entirely on micro-expressions. Since he cannot move freely, his acting relies on eyes, breathing patterns, and tension control. The relationship between Tony and Richard evolves in strange ways. What begins as terror slowly shifts into uncomfortable familiarity. They talk, they argue. Sometimes they almost behave like reluctant companions forced into proximity by circumstance. The film uses this dynamic to explore how crisis can create unexpected human connection. The crisis attracts law enforcement attention quickly. Detective Michael Grable, portrayed by Cary Elwes, leads the operation. Interestingly, Grable has personal history with Tony. This connection introduces emotional complexity into the police strategy. The police cannot simply treat Tony as a faceless criminal. Linda Page, played by Myha'la, represents the career-driven modern media impulse. She is a young television reporter trying to break a story that will define her career. The film lightly satirizes news broadcasting culture. There is even a scene where a reporter awkwardly describes his own emotional reaction live on television. Van Sant uses this humor to critique how media transforms real suffering into entertainment. Music plays a huge storytelling role. The soundtrack includes era-defining songs, such as "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" by Gil Scott-Heron, also Sprach Zarathustra by Diodato, I've Seen All Good People by Yes, Canic Chase by Labi Siffre, and Raindrops Keep Fallin' on My Head by B.J. Thomas. The music creates ironic contrast. Upbeat or spiritual songs often play during chaotic or violent tension. The film never fully decides whether Tony is hero or criminal. Instead, it lives inside the ambiguity. Tony is angry. He feels cheated by economic power. He believes he is fighting for the working class, but his method is violence. The film asks a disturbing question. Can society sympathize with someone who is both victim and aggressor? Tony and Richard eventually move to Tony's apartment. They remain there for approximately 63 hours. The film focuses on conversation rather than action. Small emotional exchanges become the real battlefield. Tony sometimes acts humorous, sometimes apologetic, sometimes terrifying. Bill Skarsgard's performance balances manic energy with human vulnerability. The story concludes with a controversial but unforgettable visual choice. Tony gives a strange, almost victorious smile. The frame freezes. It feels unsettling, not celebratory, not tragic in a traditional sense, but ambiguous. The film deliberately avoids fully dramatizing the trial. The real story had public fascination. Many people supported Tony's not guilty verdict in 1977. Some even treated him as a folk hero representing resistance against financial institutions. This theme connects directly to modern discussions about economic inequality and media-constructed heroes. The film's philosophy is anti-institutional but not simple. It explores corporate indifference, economic frustration, celebrity-style media attention, moral ambiguity of rebellion, public fascination with violence as protest. Tony becomes both warning and symbol. Dead Man's Wire is a tense, unusual, and deeply stylized crime drama. It is not interested in heroic simplicity. Instead, it asks uncomfortable questions about justice, anger, and social inequality. Supported by a career-defining performance from Skarsgard and Van Sant's confident return to atmospheric filmmaking, the movie stands as one of the most distinctive true crime adaptations in recent years. If you are fascinated by stories where the line between victim and villain disappears, where media spectacle meets personal desperation, and where history feels uncomfortably relevant to the present, then Dead Man's Wire is a film you should not ignore.